Good morning, everyone present here. Good morning, everyone present here. I, Dr. Sadaf Khan, Assistant Professor, Faculty of Law, Integral University. On behalf of entire Faculty of Law, I warmly welcome you all in the 30 days interdisciplinary faculty development program on emerging trends in administration of criminal justice system and forensic science. Today, we begin our technical session as per the third module on the topic criminal behavior and neurobiological factors under forensic science. I warmly welcome our today's resource person, Dr. Deepa Dubey ma'am. She is a distinguished professor at the Rajiv Gandhi School of Intellectual Property Laws, Indian Institute of Technology, Kharagpur. With a career spanning over 2 decades, she has made significant contributions to the field of criminal law, victimology, and gender justice. Dr. Deepa Dubey earned her LLM and PhD degrees from the University of Pune and Calcutta, respectively, and has been actively involved in the academia throughout her career. She has taught a wide range of courses, including criminal laws, criminology, penology, victimology, and evidence at esteemed institutions like NUJS, Kolkata, and NLU Jodhpur. Dr. Dubey's expertise extend to her role as Vice President of the Indian Society of Victimology, where she has honored with the ISV Fellowship in 2020. She is also a respected member of prestigious professional organizations, including the World Society of Victimology and the International Society of Criminology. Her prolific academic work comprises over 80 articles published in both national and international journals, covering topics such as victim justice, human trafficking, and rape laws. Dr. Dubey has authored 7 books, showcasing her dedication to advancing the knowledge in her field. Her most recent publication is an edited volume titled Arrest and Detention Laws in India, published by SAGE. In addition to her scholarly pursuits, Dr. Dubey ma'am has actively participated in various national and international conferences and has been invited to deliver lectures at numerous esteemed institutions, including national and state judicial academies. She has also undertaken research projects in deserved areas of criminal law, gender justice, victim justice, and disability, often receiving funding from government agency. Now, without wasting much time, I invite our today's resource person, Professor Dr. Deepa Dubey, ma'am. Now, it is over to you, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much. It's a
Thank you,
pleasure
ma'am.
for me to be here today. And thank you again for inviting me to be a part of this program. And I hope it would be a very fruitful and enriching experience. And
Sure, ma'am.
it is very rare that you come across such topics of discussion, specifically where it relates to neurobiological factors relating to criminal behavior. Thank you once again, and it's an honor for
Yeah,
me for
ma'am.
here today. Okay, so let us start I will start with the presentation. So I hope all of you can see the presentation from my side. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, so we are talking in the genre of criminology, and as you know, that there has been an entire, development, huge developments in the field where it relates to criminology. The basic concern or the basic uh, object is to understand the aspects which go behind a particular criminal behavior, why a person does what he does. So where you have a particular crime being committed and the criminal being there before us, a very intriguing question is, why did he choose to do a particular behavior, or why did he choose a particular act, and whether there are certain inherent factors which has gone into into the person, which made him or which led him to commit the particular act which we are terming as a crime, and whether that fact would be the same for any other individual who would be there in the scenario, or it would be different amongst different individuals. So that has been a continuous probe across, I would say, centuries for that matter. And that has a very strong link with also the notion of liability, as to when you make a person liable for the crime that he has committed, and whether there can be certain extenuating factors or certain mitigating factors which can reduce or the liability, or we can say that he is not the person responsible, rather it is some other conditionalities which should be looked into for the purpose of his crime commission, and therefore there should be no consequent liability which should be imposed on the person. So that has been the concern, the scope of research for criminologists, for scientists, for psychologists, and people of numerous disciplines, where people have tried to understand criminal behavior. And it is in this context that today, that when we are studying or trying to understand neurological factors behind the criminal behavior, as to what causes the criminality, or what is responsible for the criminality. Now, those who are into criminology or are exposed to the different theories, and which has gone into the explanation of causes behind the crime, there are, you can say, different rationale which has been put forward by criminologists over a period of time. So, what is the exact cause? That is something which is probably unknown to us, even to this present day, if I can, say that with emphasis. But from time to time, different criminologists, different thinkers have come forward with different reasons as to why a person commits crime. And in that, there are two major schools of thought, what we say. One is that it is led by individual factors, and the other which says that it is because of societal influences. But before that, there was, as you may be knowing, the classicists, for that matter, who brought in the notion of free will. So the question is whether individual, when he commits a crime or indulges in a criminal behavior, is it the result of his free will? As a person, as a prudent person, we are all reasonable beings, right? In every aspect of law, you must have seen, starting from tort law for that matter, we always take that the standard is of an ordinary prudent person. Now, if it is a reasonable person or ordinary prudent person, he is in control of his behavior, in a sense of the choices that he wants to exercise, whether he wants to do a certain thing, whether he does not want to do a certain thing. He will choose a thing which will give him happiness, and will preferably be away from something which is likely to bring about more pain in the process. So it is the choice between these two extremes where a person has to decide. And the classicists were largely of the opinion that it is our free will by which we decide our course of actions. So, therefore, when you have a criminal who decides on to indulge in a criminal behavior, maybe an act of theft or an act of robbery or any other act for that matter, he decides, he makes a choice as to which one he wants to go for. And after deliberating at the pleasures and pains which are involved in the act in question, he takes his next course of action, whereby whether he desists from the act, or he actually goes ahead to do the act in question, thereby violating that line which is there between non criminality and criminality. So that was one line of thought which was there, propounded by the classicists for that matter. You may be knowing many of them, and largely our criminal law and criminal domain is guided by this element of free will, where while deciding on the liability, we take it that the person did as he wanted to do. He exercised his free choice and his free will, and therefore he went ahead to do the crime in question. But as as research, as science developed, uh, there were different other factors which were gradually coming up and set us to think that is it always the free will of a person, like for example that which happened during the classicism only, that phase is where you have a person with a mental condition. Now for that person, is he in control of his senses, is he in control of his choices, whereby we can really emphasize on that element of free will and say that it is because of his free will that he indulged in the act in question. There you have a uh, big doubt which comes in the mind, because in the very first place, the man being plagued by some mental condition, obviously there was a clouding of his reasonings. His mind was clouded. He was not able to exercise the choice or understand the implications in terms of pleasure and pain so far as his behavior is concerned. So therefore it is not in all situations of free will which works, but probably there are other factors. Now what are they? That is the big question, and that is where these two lines or these two aspects of individual factors and sociological factors which came into the picture. Now, where it relates to sociological factors, you may be having other sessions, etc., or you may have already been exposed to that. That there may be many other, peripheral factors: the family that somebody is born, the school that the education somebody is exposed to, or whether there was no education, the peer group that a person has, the influences that are around him. It may be in terms of religious institutions, it may be in terms of other the community, the social institutions which are there, that has its inherent influence and in crime or criminal behavior. And this is a large part of the criminological development, where it has gone into evolution of different theories, which has tried to explain the notion of criminality. But what is this biological factor? That is probably has its genesis or its beginning somewhere, I'm sure you may be knowing, with the positive school of thought, right? I think everybody is aware of the name of Cesare Lombroso, who was one of the prominent founders of this school, where uh, people tried to focus, criminologists tried to study the individual per se, to try to understand as to whether there are certain inherent biological, psychological factors which went into the commission of the crime. So somewhere they were of the opinion that criminality is probably inherent in an individual, and there are certain factors which distinguish him from other people. Right now, please remember, when we are speaking of the Lombroso or the positivist school, when or the Italian criminologists, which where they are often referred to, Lombroso, Garofalo, Ferri, etc., that when we speak of these people, that was the very initial beginning of appreciating that whether there can be certain biological factors which go into the crime commission. That was something new, and that was the very beginning of this idea. And therefore, the way in which Lombroso, and his fellow colleagues or proponents tried to put it forward, we may not be agreeable to that, in a sense that, if a person has long ears, big jawline, six fingers, you may be able to differentiate that person as being different. But please remember that at the present time may seem very somewhat silly to us, or very very trivial to us, because that may not be a way in which you can distinguish crime. But obviously, his research was also based on certain studies which he did in prison, and thereby he was able to come up with certain factors or certain reasons, whereby he said that it is in the inherent biology of the person. But today, when we talk of neurobiological factors, etc., probably we have to draw our influence or our connection from that those beginnings which happened with the development of the positive school, whereby they brought in the focus on the individual, and the individual internalities which are there in an individual, in terms of their biological make, their psychological make, and that its influence on the criminal behavior. This is just a picture as drawn by some of the criminologists, where they tried to, make certain, in the brain, the human brain that is there, and that is a very complex structure. And we know there is the left hemisphere, there is the right hemisphere, then what is responsible for which reaction or which aspect of an individual. So that was somewhere where the criminologists were gradually drawn to the human body, and trying to understand the various mechanisms which are there in the body, which had it, and whether they had any influence in the crime or criminal behavior, for that matter. Now, please remember, there is no, as I said in the very beginning, no final answer that you have to the whole, to the entire question as to what causes crime. There is no one factor which can go into its explanation. But yes, somewhere today we have an understanding, we have some research which I'm coming to gradually, which have indicated that probably it can be the brains and the neurons, the nervous system which is there in individual, which has its own way of responding to situations. But please remember, they are also conditioned. There is a learning process. They are also conditioned by the by the associated circumstances and situations that we are in. But nevertheless, the brain, which is functioning, it may not be similarly responsive or similarly behaving in all situations for all individuals, for that matter. It may have its own divisions, its own nuances in specific situations, where a person suffers from certain brain disorders, right? Now, it is possible in that situation that the person's response to a particular circumstance, that there is a, let us say, a verbal fight between two individuals going on. Now, you will find that if you just see maybe in the street or somewhere, it may be a sudden reaction from one of the individual, that he suddenly becomes very aggressive and responds in a very aggressive manner, and goes on to become very violent in this situation. But in another circumstance, if you put two individuals who are in a a verbal disagreement, you may find that they just stop it at a certain place and they just walk away. Now, why this difference of somebody becoming violent and somebody reacting in a different manner? that is specifically where you have the difference in how the brain and your system processes the entire event as it is happening before you, and how they are responding to that particular situation. So therefore, in recent times there has been a renewed interest in the various neurobiological factors which are there in criminology and can have a dominant role, and that has focused on trying to explain the antisocial behavior or even predict antisocial behavior. Right, certain children who display certain behavior very early in life. Now, is it possible that you can draw from there, or you can understand from there what would be their future manifestations, and from there can we say that it is possible that this person is at a higher risk of crime commission than somebody else in a different in the same situation. So prediction of antisocial behavior and the ways in which neurobiological factors interact with psychological and environmental factors. So, when we are speaking of the environmental factors, we are referring to the societal influences that are there, because as individuals, we do not stand, in an isolated frame, but we have to see ourselves in a context. So, all that is around us all has its influence in our making and in our internalities as well. So that is why these researchers have also tried to see that when it comes in interaction with other factors, how are they likely to change a person, how are they likely to result in certain aspects of criminal behavior. And that is where has been the current neurobiological research where it has focused. Now, if you see, neurologic biological factors and antisocial behavior, there can be three associations largely which are made out. One is a direct association where neurobiological, different deficits, different shortcomings, which are inherently there in an individual, which automatically or inherently leads to antisocial behavior, and therefore there is a sort of a direct relation between the commission of the crime and the individual, if I say, deficit or the defect which is there in the individual. I have given certain examples of certain studies that where there was a clinical analysis by Pierre Bricken with regard to convicted murderers who were in prison. It was found that a significant number, that was about 31%, showed evidence of brain abnormalities like epilepsy, traumatic brain injury, genetic disorders, etc. So these are certain things which are there inherently in the person, and that probably led, because most of these studies, please remember, are done through individual examination, mostly of criminals or others, and therefore from there they try to ascertain that what is the extent or what is the percentage of people who display a certain type of a disorder, and whether therefore that disorder had some connection with the crime in question. There can be indirect associations as well, where neurological disorders cause personality problems, and those personality problems in turn lead to antisocial behavior. So there are certain inherent neurological defects which are there in the person, and because of those inherent neurological defects such as impulsivity, lack of self control, as I just few minutes back I said about a quarrel between two individuals and one suddenly losing control and becoming violent, like that lack of self control is somewhere linked to his personality, somewhere it goes back to some of a neurological problem which is there, and that makes the person to end up in a criminal activity. And the rest is interactive, where different factors interact with one another, different neurological defects interact with other traits or other social conditions which are there, and that may lead to situations whereby a person displays a probable uh, uh, um, uh, social or a probable criminal behavior, like kids who have neurological problems may face sort of a parental rejections. Now that parental rejection coupled with the inherent problems that are there, that aggravates the whole situation, and the person, the child may feel that the child is unwanted, the child does not get the necessary love and attention, and in that process somewhere the negative aspect takes prominence over the positive part, and there is likely an engagement in criminal behavior. So this is how generally the interactions or association which happens between the neurological neurobiological factors and antisocial behavior. And as I was saying, that there is a probably a possible prediction which can be done. But please remember, at the end of the day, which obviously towards the end of the lecture also, which I would like to mention, is you cannot say that simply because somebody, as I am saying, epilepsy. Now epilepsy, we know, is a condition where a person suffers because of certain inherent issues. The person suffers in a particular manner. Now it may come to your mind, or you may have a thought that there are many, you may have come across, or you may know many epileptic persons who have never displayed any sort of criminal behavior. That's very likely, and in most situations it may not be really a situation where, because certain neurobiological defect is there, that the person will naturally turn to criminality for that matter. This is just trying to figure that whether there are any connections. Please remember, any connections between that condition and the subsequent criminality. But for that matter, nobody can say for sure that because the condition exists, naturally the person would have inclination towards the commission of crime, which is not true in all situations. But this is what scientists over the period of time have tried to decipher, that what may be the probable causes. Now I will go to the different different studies and different conditions. There are whole lot of, it's a huge area and a huge domain, and there are a whole lot of studies which have been carried out, are being carried out, and it's a continuous process, right? So I would just be able to tell you or expose you to some of the factors which I have listed today, in order to just make you aware of what may be some of the biological factors, and what has been some of the evidence which has come as to their linkages with crime and criminal behavior. But please remember the underlying thing, that it is not necessary that it will automatically or in all situations lead to crime for that purpose. Now one is genetics, and genetics is very important aspect, as you know, and it is passed on from grandparents to parents to parents to children, children to grandchildren, so it flows in a line. Now it's possible that there are certain inherent genetic defects in a person, just like one of the studies which show or which reflect with regard to chromosomal anomalies. There are 23 pairs of chromes in each cell, and that is how a person's sex is determined based on the combination of the chromosomes which are there. So this is quite generally known by all of us. If it is a XX, it's a female. If it is a XY, it is male. And that is the normal combination which is there, the XY or the XX. But Is it a possibility that there is a XXY or a XYY or a double X double Y and somewhat something similar? Now, many researchers have shown that people who may have this extra chromosome in their body, and this has mainly been a concern with males, that they have been maybe a XYY or a double X double Y or a X triple Y, that there has been, if we see it as a anomaly which is there in the constitution of the chromosome which is there. Now, why it has happened, please remember, that is beyond the human process. That is, when a child is born, the child is born with that particular anomaly. However, studies in a Scottish mental hospital, where researchers found that there were people who had different chromosomal anomalies, and these people were in the mental hospital and they were mentally ill, and somewhere their mental frame was referred to as subnormal, right? They were not people whom we can put as normal beings, but they were somewhere in the subnormal category. And therefore, subsequently more researchers were able to find out that where you have a people with that extra chromosome, uh, they are likely to be more dangerous, violent, or criminal in terms of their activities. As I said, that somebody may suddenly turn to be aggressive, suddenly turn to be violent in a specific situation. Now, that if we make a deeper probe into the situation, it's not unlikely that we may be able to find that probably there is certain inherent genetic defect so far as the person is concerned. A defect in the sense that we are, when we are putting it uh, at par with the normal, which is the XY or XX, in that sense I'm saying. So if that, because of that deficit or that anomaly which is there, and which, please remember, is beyond the control of that individual, going back in reference to that concept of free will, as I told you. So there the individual, that child does not really have a control in the genetic make of the person, and it is likely that because of that inherent deficit which is there, the child or the young person or a particular individual adult exhibits a particular type of what we call as antisocial behavior. Similarly, another study by Witkin in 1977 confirmed that 41% of XYY men had at least one conviction, compared with 9% of the XYs. So, therefore, when we put them, the person with the extra chromosome, at par with a group which has XY genetic formation, there probably the chances or probability of the person indulging in a criminal behavior is much more with respect to the former group than where it relates to the later group, for that matter. Okay, so this is one of the, I just said, being exposing you to just some of the researches or some of the probabilities which have been there, and this is one of the particular things which have come across. Similarly, as I said, genes are certain things which are passed on from one generation to the other, and it goes on, it runs in the family. Now, criminality, can it be inherited, is a very big question, and that is why, where people have sometimes, certain people have found that yes, I mean, many situations, there is an inheritance which comes in the process, because there has been very strong correlations which have been found between the criminality of parents and children, as well as criminality of brothers, right? So if the parents are, for if I say, are criminal or antisocial or indulging in antisocial and violent behavior, there is a greater likelihood that the similar behavior would be exhibited by the children for that matter, or even as between the siblings. Now, the question is it the result of the societal influence that is there, the family influence that is there, or is it the result of the genes? And that is where there is a, a big tug of war, or a big discussion as to which plays a more prominent role, while keeping while being aware, or keeping aside the factor that yes, that family influence, the family surrounding, the environment factor does have an influence on that. Researchers have still said that, even when a child is separated from the parents at an early age, because the latter were imprisoned, that is, the parents were imprisoned, even in that situation, the children at a later point of time is likely to becoming criminals, right? So what does that indicate? That indication is very strong in towards the direction that even when the environmental influence is cut off, right, the environmental influence is removed, because the children are no longer exposed to the parents having been separated from the children at a very early age. But those parents who have been convicted prisoners, later on, somewhere we find that these children also end up in criminality, right? Why? Now, that means there is something more than that environmental influence. So, even if a person is put in in uh, a good a condition, a social situation where the person is not exposed to the negativities of life, or the negative influences of life, there is a chance that the person will still tread the path of the parents, because there is a link which probably we cannot identify, but it is in the genes, and it is in the inheritance of of this, from parent to child, child to the next generation, where it is passed, and therefore they are likely to have its own inherent influences. So therefore, if parents are criminal, it's most likely that they will pass on the tendency on to their children. And there was a Cambridge study of 1960 on delinquent behavior, where 397 families who were studied, three quarters of convicted mothers and fathers have a convicted child, right? So therefore, gene as one of the very important biological factors which are there, has its own influences in the entire process. And this study has been taken forward by studying twins, by studying adoptees, and there also researchers and scientists have tried to see that in those settings, or in that situation, what is the probability of one person reflecting the behavior of the other, right? Now, twins, that there are two categories in terms of genetic terms: identical twins and what we call as fraternal twins. Where we have identical twins, it's a single fertilized egg which produces two embryos, and they are genetically identical. So that is what we see many times when we come across twins, that they absolutely, they are a photocopy of each other. That is what we call as identical twins. And there is the other twin, which are fraternal twins, and the result of two eggs being fertilized at the same time. Please remember, they do not have an identical heredity and are in the same position as siblings born after different pregnancies. So I, the similarity which is reflected in case of identical twins is obviously not there when it comes to fraternal twins. Now, Lange, in one, he has, greatly studied the aspect of identical twins and fraternal twins. And in case of identical twins, he found that 77% of cases, he found that the other person, if one had a criminal record, the other also had a criminal record of imprisonment. But in case where it came to fraternal twins, only about 12% was shown to have a reflected a criminal behavior. So therefore the criminal concordance, which he called it, he found was very high when it came to identical twins. Please remember, the other study was with regard to parents, children, and the next generation as it passes. This is between the siblings, or brothers for that matter. And that is where it is seen, because they are somewhere genetically connected. There is a possibility that one also has reflects the same behavior of the other. So where one has a criminal tendency, it is likely that it will be also somewhere reflected in the other twin for that matter. But it may not be so in case the criminal concordance is low when it comes to fraternal twins, because somewhere they may be taken differently in terms of their genetic make. So somewhere he said that heredity has a major part in the causation of crime. And in another study where Newman compared 42 pairs of identical twins and 25 pairs of fraternal twins, a criminal concordance of 93% was recorded for the identical twins, which was very high, compared to 20% were for fraternal twins. So somewhere heredity, genetic lineage, these were reflected in the criminal behavior. And as between individuals who were connected with each other by means of blood, etc., it was seen that there is a likelihood of this criminal tendency passing on, or you cannot always call it in terms of crime, but an antisocial tendency passing on from one to the other. Now, this was also studied not with biological parents, but also with adopted children. And most of the times what was done is, maybe from the biological parent, the child was separated, and then the child was put in another home where the person has been adopted. And then what was tried to be seen is, these natural parents or the biological parents, they had certain criminal influences, or they had indulged in criminality. And then it was tried to be experimented or seen as to when this child was put in a different home and was with the adopted parents, whether that child in a, these are all, please remember, longitudinal studies. So it is done over a period of time, that whether the child, in his range of 10 years, 20 years, did he ever end up in some form of criminal behavior, or did he violate the law at any point of time. Now, in studies of 52 adopted children where their mother had criminal records, eight were found to have been arrested, some of them more than once, and seven of them had been convicted. And this as against a control group. As you know, sociological, this type of studies, there is a control group where it was there. As against that, this group was found having more propensity towards crime for that matter. Please remember, in spite of being adopted in a different family, where there were absolutely, they were away from any sort of criminal influences. The only connection which was there with the antisocial behavior is where their natural biological mother had been convicted and had certain criminal records. Now, therefore, what was found is, there is a likelihood of these children, even though placed in a very safe and independent environment, away from all the influences, these children are likely to stray and go back to, to their origin in terms of indulging in certain criminal behavior or exhibiting certain criminal tendencies. So therefore, these are, please remember, it's very difficult to therefore draw any conclusions. We are not drawing conclusion, but that only leaves us thinking that is it possible that there is a certain inherent connection which happens with, because of the genes of the person, because of what you inherit, because of certain anomaly in the genes, that there is a possibility inherently for the person to engage in a criminal activity. And that is also, the as this slide shows, it has been done with many other situations. The story or the study of adoptees have been similarly reflected in many other situations, and most of the situations were found to be reflecting or coming to the same conclusion. So this was with, where one was a law abiding group, which was the adopted parents, and the law violative group, which was the biological parents. And there, even in spite of staying with the group which respected the law, it was found that there is a possibility of these children drifting towards criminality in the way of life. So therefore, a strong correlation can be, somewhere established in the process. Now, as I said, when you have the brain is a very, very complex organ of the body. And what, many times scientists say that we are able to decipher, we generally use a very minuscule percentage of the brain. And there are many situations or possibilities that, there may be during birth or in prenatal stage, because of one of the or the other as issues which are there, or maybe trauma which is there may be different brain dysfunctions. Minimal brain dysfunction, which refers to abnormal cerebral structure with which a person is born. So when we refer to MBD, or minimal brain dysfunction, it is defined as abruptly appearing maladaptive behavior that interrupts with an individual's lifestyle and life flow. And that you can see in different aspects, such as dyslexia, visual perception problems, poor attention, temper tantrums, aggressiveness. So when there are these abnormal structures, there is a maladaptive behavior which is reflected in that child or in that individual for that matter. And it exhibits itself in one or the other form. Some child, you will finds it very difficult to concentrate, to focus on a certain thing. They are into different things at different times. You may find children, throwing tantrums. Now, the general children are generally throw tantrums, so that is not for us to think that everybody has some abnormality for that matter. But sometimes you see them behaving in a certain way which probably we do not term as very normal, or suddenly become aggressive. I have come across, in different studies, etc., children who are of the very young age, maybe 8 years, 12 years, who turn towards very violent towards their parents. And even a situation where a child took up a knife to attack the mother, because the mother refused something. So you find different sort of uh, behavior or behavioral pattern in children. Now, that may be because of linkages which it has with certain aspects or certain deficits which are there in the the cerebral structure which is there. But please remember, where it exhibits in these forms, later on it has been seen that it leads to many antisocial behavior. Generally, when we speak of pedophiles, child abuse, or we refer to domestic violence problems, you will find many men indulging in domestic violence, where the slightest of thing triggers something in them, and they become very violent, and they use and they rather do not think before using any sort of being violent against their partners. Now, those behaviors have been seen to have strong linkages with MBD, or minimal brain dysfunction. And that is where probably the answer lies, in terms of how you try to understand, or how you try to interpret the entire situation for that matter. One of the examples of these MBD is learning disability. I think this may be a bad reference, but all of us more or less have some idea. We have many of us have seen the film Tare Zameen Par. Now, that was obviously a very positive impact, and we had a very good outcome in the entire process. That is so for many situations which is there. But there is the other side also. When I said that an interactive association between neurobiological factors and antisocial behavior. So if you remember in that film, just because those films are certain things which we makes us to understand very easily. If you remember the child who was unable to dyslexic, and was unable to go with his classmates in terms of his learning, because he found it very difficult to understand the numbers, alphabets, in the way that ordinary beings, or generally most people do. And if you remember the type of parental reactions that was there, where the father interpreted that he is trying to escape, and he's trying to create problems, and the simple problem is he doesn't want to learn. And that is why he was put in a sort of away from his family, in a hostel, so that they thought that with that rigor, probably what he is doing can easily be remedied. But unfortunately, the answer does not lie in that, because the problem is somewhere else. And it is a disorder of one or more of the basic psychological processes involved in understanding or using spoken or written languages. So the person finds it very difficult, maybe, to process things, to understand things, to interpret things in the way that any other normal individual does. And such children with learning disabilities, they have maybe poor motor coordination, behavioral problems, improper auditory and vocal responses. So because of this particular dysfunction which is there of the brain, it results in many other forms of behavioral deficits. And maybe if you ask the child to pick up something and give it to you, because of this poor motor coordination, the child may not be able to really do that. Maybe a glass of water, the glass may fall from his hand, or listening to his the commands of his parents. If the parent says do something, the child may not be able to process it, and therefore there may be a possibility that it may result in somewhere, if it is not remedied, if it is not addressed at the right time, it may lead towards an antisocial behavior. Now, this association, generally criminologists put it as two ways in which it happens. One is the susceptibility rationale, which says that the link is caused by certain effects or side effects of learning disability, such as impulsiveness, poor ability to learn from experience, because many of the things that we do is experiential, what we are doing on an everyday basis. So we know and we follow the pattern, right? That is something which probably a child with learning disability may find it difficult. Similarly, the child has a school failure rationale. That's one very, very important influence which is there. The frustration which comes with that disability, unless the disability is identified, unless the disability is addressed or properly, properly referred to, it produces poor performance. Now remember that frustration gradually, isolates the child and makes the child away from the normal routine of life, studying, playing, interacting with children, etc. When that gradually fails in the process, it leads to a negative self imaging, that I am bad, I am this, I am that. So once the child starts labeling himself or herself in a particular way, it is possible that at some point of time, the child, because of that anger, that frustration which develops in the child may go out all the way and turn, to more negative things, to more to things which are not generally or usually approved by the society, and gradually it progresses to the domain of criminality. So this is one of the popular examples which are there with regard to brain dysfunction which comes with learning disabilities, and that learning disabilities in turn leads to many other shortcomings in terms of his the physical abilities of the person, behavioral responses of the person. So it's a it's a overall package in a sense, because it's not one thing at a time, but it's a complex factor of many of different biological, psychological, sociological factors. It's an interplay of all of that, and that gradually draws the person towards criminality for that matter. And one of the studies by Tomar and Amela Einat found that 69% of prison inmates were characterized by learning disabilities. So somewhere, there were certain deficiencies with regards to the person, and in the absence of an adequate social support or a positive societal response, these people had turned to criminality at some point of time, because probably they felt that the society does not accept them as they are, because the problem that is inherent in them is not something which is understood or appreciated by anybody. These are certain things, these days there is a more and more, what you can say, awareness with regard to many of these aspects or vulnerabilities which are there. And there are a lot of bodies, lot of organizations who offer support to parents when they are faced with such a child. So that the reason is because of these, these studies, these continuous in the field of medical research, this continuous understanding which is coming with the different conditions of the body, of the mind which are there, which has led us to somewhere understand these phenomena in a better manner, and therefore respond to them as early as possible, instead of somewhere waiting till the last moment where it may be a different situation altogether. So that has been one of the good things which are there, and criminological studies have definitely added to the whole specter of this research which is there. Another condition which is there is ADHD in with doctors, or with children. People might have come across this particular term, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. This is, we say, sometimes quite common in children, where you will find a child is, as I said, is unable to concentrate, unable to focus. If you ask the child to study, you'll find the, more than a minute or 5 minutes, the child, just simply loses attention. Just what the child is runs around, indulges in lot of things, just want to follow one's own, what one, his own mind, and engage in different activities. And those activities are, bizarre activities, jumping from places, doing things which are, maybe risk associated, so on and so forth. These are essentially children whom, these days are identified as having problems of ADHD, that is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now, so they lack attention, they are extremely hyperactive, and they are impulsive. Now, this is because of, certain prenatal situations of stress, etc., some neurological damages which might be there with these children, certain chemical, biochemical conditions in the body, there may be an abnormality with regard to these factors. And in addition, these are aggravated by social conditions, that if the family is a disturbed family, there is a certain emotional turmoil in the family, etc., then these things are further aggravated. They are aggravated, but please remember that the condition is inherently there in the individual. These days, just generally knowing, I am not a person from science, so may not be able to clearly or rightly reflect on that, but psychologists try out different mechanisms. Whenever a child is identified with ADHD, they try out different mechanisms as to, what are some of the exercises, what are some of the things which can be done with the child, whereby the focus can be brought back, the tremendous hyperactivity which is there in the child, that can be reduced. So these things are there. But remember, when a child is of that nature, automatically the child becomes a eyesore for the school, eyesore for the family. There is definitely most situations a poor school performance which is there, which becomes a matter of, as I said, a eyesore, which becomes a matter of disagreement, dislike, so far as the family is concerned. There may be situations, obviously disciplining such child becomes a big challenge, because the child refuses, in any way to agree to any disciplining methods. There is a certain stubbornness, etc., which develops in the child. And then there are, links of this condition with delinquency, or with, what we say, a conflicting behavior, so far as the children is concerned. These children very often take to the wrong side of things, so take to the non approved behavior, such as, drinking at a very early age, smoking at a early age, and that gradually progresses to, maybe taking drugs. And as one moves up, there may be indulgence, because then you require money, so you start stealing, and it graduates to more and more serious crimes. Okay, so that is how the entire progression happens. And it starts early, before birth. When a child is, in a mother's womb, there might be stress, there might be a trauma, there might be a situation because of which the child has suffered a damage in terms of his neurological conditions. And there and that is aggravated by the social factors which are there, and that gradually leads to the criminality of the person. So therefore, these are, different factors that we come across when we talk of the neurobiological factors and criminal behavior. There is another aspect which links crime with the intelligence. We know that there is an average IQ, so far as ordinary individuals, you and I, are concerned. But please remember, you and I am saying, but the line between criminality and non criminality, I tell my students, is always very thin. So we do not know when we will tread the other side. So anyway, what scientists say is that they have a below average intelligence, and that low IQ somewhere is responsible for their criminality. Which somewhere a substandard intelligence comes in the process, and that uh, you know uh, uh, has a natural inclination, develops a natural inclination in these people to indulge in some or the other delinquent activity or antisocial activity for that matter, thereby pushing them into the zone of crime and criminality. And in this regard, with regard to intelligence for that matter, there is a big debate which is known as the nature versus nurture debate, which is, it lies at the core of this entire understanding of criminal behavior. As I said in the beginning, what is that which which triggers that criminal activity in a person? So whether it is nature, when we are speaking with of nature, we are referring to the neurobiological factors which are there, that where because of genetics, because of ancestry, or because of many other reasons, these children or these people have an inherent low intelligence, which is demonstrated by low IQ, and that automatically leads to the criminal behavior. And there were different persons: Henry Goddard, William Haley, Augusta Bronner, different people at different points of time who have done studies, and they have somewhere come to the understanding that it is more a natural phenomena. That's where nature comes in, a natural phenomena, something which you cannot probably alter, something which you cannot interfere with, and that is where the criminal behavior comes in. In contrast, obviously, you have what we call as the nurture debate, and you can understand by the use of the words nurture that it is how a person is nurtured. Some part of it is definitely the intelligence or the IQ that a person is born with. But please remember, there are different sociological and environmental stimulations which come from the association that one has. So, as I was saying, whether it's the immediate association, that's the family, that's the parents, the relatives, the social contacts, the peer group, and the education that one is in, the entire community position that one is in, that has its own influence in the development of the IQ of a child. So therefore, if we are saying low IQ is associated with criminal behavior, that low IQ is not only the result of nature, but is further propagated or aggravated by the nurture which is there. And that reflects in the criminals, that when you have criminals, you find them maybe from a particular cultural background, from a particular economic background, from a particular social background. That is why, because these particular people have not been exposed, or have been exposed to a very negative situations of life, and therefore their low IQ has not been somewhere uh, uh, you know mm, uh, developed or worked upon, whereby they could have been better individuals or law abiding individuals of society. Somewhere that has been affected. There are also studies in that which shows that it is also because of the sociological influences which are there, where it says that IQ is a determining factor in criminal behavior, where because society also somewhere uh, discourages them, so society somewhere separates them. And when you have low IQ, you do poor in school, and that academic incompetence and school failure gradually makes the person what you call as a dropout from the education. And once the person becomes a dropout, then the person starts engaging with similar individuals who are indulgent in other criminal behavior, so on and so forth. And that ultimately leads to somewhere a violent behavior, a disagreement with society, a dislike towards the societal various aspects which are there, indulging in theft, etc. And that gradually pushes the person towards criminality. So it's a big debate which is there between the crime and criminality for that matter. And that is the nature versus nurture debate. As I told you, you can further look into that. So when coming towards the end of the discussion that we have today, now there are certain things, something which I've written here, that all behavior, not just deviant behavior, is caused by a complex interplay between our neurobiology, that is the genes, brains, hormones, the psychology, that is the cognitive emotional mechanisms such as empathy, inhibition, self control, etc., and the environment. So it is an interplay of all of those things, right? And please remember that is for all behavior. So it need not only be demarcated or outlined for criminal behavior, but it is for even law abiding behavior. Why a person is law abiding? If you look into that, you will again find that they go back to our neurobiology, our psychology, and our social factors together, which make a whole difference with how we react to the situation. Like they say that people who are risk takers, and there are people who are risk averse, right? So if I see that if I do something, like if I take an example that shoplifting is something people do for fun. People many times, it's shoplifting is not really for a situation that a person is in dearth of money, but is many times because of fun, because of the excitement which is there, or it may be because somebody wants certain thing and cannot afford it. Now in that situation, if you are in a shopping mall, you are in a particular shop, and you come across something which you want, you like, that you fancy that particular thing. Now how a person will react in that situation, whether a person will go ahead to go and pick up, because you cannot pay for that thing, will go and pick up that thing in spite of knowing that there are security guards, there are cameras all over, and you are likely to be captured. Whether a person will go ahead with that, or a person in the same situation, knowing that yes, there are security guards, and yes, there is a camera which is watching me, will step back. So that is what we say, risk takers and risk averse. Now that decision, please remember, is a interplay of the inherent factors which are there, some which are external and the rest which are internal. There is no one to one relationship between biological factors and crime. Many individuals with biological risk factors will not go on to commit crimes, and some individuals who do not exhibit a specific risk factor may proceed to commit a crime. So that is something we must be we must be aware of at the end of the day, that it's not a straight jacket formula. As I said, that somebody with epilepsy will end up in criminality, somebody with dyslexia will exhibit criminality. No, we have many people, many situations around us where we come across these people, and they are absolutely fine. At least there are no such criminal incidences so far as these people are concerned. So what puts somebody different from the other? Their scientists have only identified that probably there is a likelihood that this factor may have interacted in the criminality of the person. So therefore it's possible with certain biological factors somebody may react to a situation which may be violative of the law, but there may be other individuals who do not exhibit that biological condition yet end up in a criminal behavior. So that is why there is no conclusive answer to this entire thing. But after having discussed, the different, there may be many other, factors which are there. As I said, the research is too broad, too huge to really encapsulate within a particular time frame, and it's an ongoing research which may be very difficult to capture in its holistic sense. But just thereby understanding, or thus just by thereby reflecting on these factors, are very important questions that we, as maybe me as a lawyer, how does it become important for me to know as to whether there were any individual factors which went into the criminality of a person. Now that is a very interesting question, and that is where you have, to fix the crime responsibility of a particular person. There, can we really bring forward the neurobiological factor, or can forensic science really unearth the neurobiological factor which went into the criminality? Yeah, and if such a factor is brought forth before the court, would the court, or how would the court react to that particular situation? Now this is gradually an area which is developing. As I said, our criminal law is basically premised on the notion of what we call as the free will aspect, which is there. And somewhere we are therefore focused on a situation that all the criminal behavior that is happening, whether somebody is committing crime, somebody is committing theft, somebody is committing rape, or whatever the person is doing, it was a very conscious and a voluntary volitional act on the part of the individual, right? But if tomorrow, let us say, as in United States, in some of the situations, it has come that they have tried to see that what is exactly the factor. Was it really the individual which went into the commission of the crime, or was it some other factor which propelled the person towards that particular criminal behavior? So that is one of the very important challenges which are there in this entire situation. And in I don't know whether you know, in some of the cases, but very rarely from the defense side, this element has been brought, that there may be a physical and an internal examination so far as the offender is concerned, to find out as to whether he suffers from any of the defects. And yes, there have been some cases where, for the purpose of mitigation of liability or mitigation of punishment, that is reducing the sentence, there have been some cases. I have not really put or considered that, because it was more with regard to neurobiological factors. But this is something very interesting, where it has been brought forth that the person had some typical condition in him, which the defense argued that probably that might have been one of the inherent causes leading to the criminality so far as the person is concerned. So far as I know, there may have been changes, but till now, mostly the court has not really allowed for though arguments have come in its determination of sentence, or in its determination of liability. The courts have not considered the condition for that purpose. Uh, you obviously, all of you must be knowing that there is anyway in criminal law, the situation of insanity, etc., which is there which also looks into the mental condition of a person. But there are certain legal tests which have been laid down there, And if those tests are satisfied, if you obviously you refer to section, if I'm not wrong, section 84 of the Indian Penal Code, that the person does not understand whether the nature of the act, or he does not understand whether it's wrong or violative of law. So this is the, the twin tests which are there, and if that is only satisfied, then only the argument of the defense with regard to the insanity of the person, and therefore the inability of the person to really appreciate or foresee the consequences and the consequent liability of a person is considered. That's why it is in chapter 4 of the Indian Penal Code, leading to general exceptions. But beyond that, that is what is the challenge which is coming up in the coming days, that whether it would be possible to identify other factors, because please remember, these are factors where you do not have a control. These are beyond. Some factors can be interfered with, can be, improved, and probably in that situation you can really make a difference in terms of the way in which the person would react in a situation. But there are many other factors, as I said, genetic make of a person, where really there is no scope for any interference to be done. Now in that situation, whether it's possible for the court, or is it possible for criminal law for that matter, to really consider that particular situation, and I do not know, determine liability in a particular way, so as to, because there the person inherently has certain shortcomings, has certain deficit, and the person has no control over it, and whether forensic science can really predict that and put forth that particular situation before the court, and whether the court will consider such a situation, is a challenge which is gradually coming up. In one of the papers which I had written, it is published in SCC, that is Supreme Court cases, that is on genetics of crime, with one of my students, where we had reflected on the different ways in which the criminal behavior is reacting with the genes for that matter. And I remember that they had suggested that there can you draw some reference to some Indian cases. So one of the cases I had referred to is the Nithari killings, if you remember, few years back. Now it is quite some years back. In Noida, there were a spate of killings of young girls. Basically, what was said is it was a closed house, and the servant, Surendra Kohli, if I am not wrong, was used to stay in the house. And when the matter gradually unfolded, investigation unfolded, it was found that there were many girls who were made prey by this person, and he exhibited a certain kind of behavior where he used to, there was necrophilia, where he used to have sex with the dead bodies, he used to stay with the dead bodies, he used to drink, he used to make some with the bones and all, used to boil them and have food. So what I mean to say is, this type of a particular behavior, which generally does not go with the normal human being. So one of the uh, concerns can be, is it really the individual, or is it something in the individual which makes him uh, which makes him to consider these activities as normal and something which can be done, because our ordinary brain and our ordinary mind tells us, we will call these as something monstrous, uh, beyond human comprehension. But for that person who indulged in such activity, probably it was, something very common, something normal. Obviously the court convicted him, but there remains a big question as to whether neurobiology could have afforded an answer in that particular situation, and whether that would have made any difference in the entire. I do not I do not know that whether the person can be acquitted based on that, but whether there can be certain ways that the person can be whether our custodial institutions really do uh, help in that situation, or there can be certain medical interventions, etc. That is a big question which remains, and I end with that question, which I leave it to the viewers and to the people who have joined today, that it is a very interesting field, and those of you who are interested can read and probe in further and try to understand that how these neurobiological factors can have an influence with regard to criminal behavior, and in terms of forensic science, trying to probe into that, to what extent can it be really helpful in bringing about an entire difference in the gamut of criminal liability. So with this, I end today's lecture, and I thank everybody who is here, and specifically the organizers for the wonderful topic that they have conceived, and it was really really a pleasure of mine.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now, ma'am, there is a question and answer round. If
Okay.
you are comfortable, ma'am, a
Yeah,
question is
because
in the
yeah.
chat box, ma'am, from our participant. What are the current challenges and future directions in the study of neurobiological factors in criminal
In
behavior?
Yeah, that
Yes,
is what I ended with, right? That is the big
yes, ma'am.
challenge
Yes,
with
ma'am.
regard to the determination. I did not see the question, but anyway, that is why we are, one aspect is understanding those neurobiological factors. But please remember, that is also a continuously growing field. The more we are unearthing, the more we understand that we do not know many of the factors, and each day more and more things are coming up. So therefore there is no straight jacket compartment that okay, 1 2 3 4, these are the biological factors. It's a ever growing field. Now the moment this is evolving, it is posing more questions with regard to our understanding, or our entire rationale of criminal liability and criminal law is premised on a basic aspect of free will, right? When we say mens rea, so that is what we are trying to look into, that he had that mental element to commit, bring about a certain desired result. Now did he really have that desire, that mental frame, or was the mental frame propelled by some other factor, right? And if it is propelled by some other factor, does criminal law and criminal liability have an answer in that situation? So today that is a thing. Very little, because I said in US in some of the cases they admitted that argument, but they did not rely on it. But probably we do not know in the next 10 15 years, when science evolves more strongly, medical science is able to understand more about the brain and the human nervous system. uh, we will really be at a loss as to how we conceptualize our basic understanding of criminal law and criminal liability. So that is what is the present challenge, which is gradually coming before us.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your insightful lecture. Now, the time for the formal vote of thank. I convey my deep regards and heartiest thanks today's resource person, Professor Dr. Deepa Dubey, ma'am, on the topic criminal behavior and neurobiological factors under forensic science. She gave us time for her busiest schedule. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you from our entire
Thank
FDP
you.
team and faculty of law, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.